Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's the Jacked Up Review Show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show.
And we're back with another exclusive. Here to join me in and just more, 10 best in a filmmaker's catalog is Podcasting After Dark, Corey Stevenson. Woo!
Hey there, buddy. Can we pause for 1 second? I apologize.
Sure.
You just said 10. I thought we were doing a top 5.
Like, we each do a top 5.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. My bad.
No,
That's
it's
my
fine.
bad.
No.
I just got super scared for a minute. I didn't want to ruin anything. I'm sorry.
No, you'll be fine. It's all good. So podcasting's been pretty hectic into the year recording this, but I just figured, this was not an easy filmmaker to cast. There's many Verhoeven fans, and some of them haven't seen even some of the better known ones. It always amazes me how many people I encounter who still haven't seen Total Recall or, even some of his So Bad They're Good movies like Showgirls. So it's just like, man, okay, really? Okay. He's just been how did you come into him? His movies?
How did I discover Verhoeven?
Right. He was pretty easy to find at the video stores and the movie channels, but he would just always come up, and he was a very satirical Dutch filmmaker, launched the careers of Rutger Hauer and cinematographer turned director Jan de Bont, movie baddie Jeroen Krabbe. He's always been one of those. He just kind of came out of nowhere. But how did you just personally just kind of cherish him?
I quote unquote discovered he landed in my lap when I was 9 years old, and my dad took me to go see Robocop. And and
There you
let
go.
me tell you, it was fun, but it was a bit harrowing. My dad kind of had a, we bond over movies. I'm 42. I was born in 78, product of the 80s, and woo, yeah, greatest decade, guys. At least for entertainment and toys, especially. But but my dad also kind of came from a divorced family, latchkey kid, the total 80s 9 yards, the whole 9 yards of the 80s. And my dad and I bonded by going to movies together, and inappropriate movies age-wise for me, because he took me to see Aliens when I was like 8 years old. I saw Predator in the theater when I was like 8 or 9. And Robocop. And for the most part, like my dad, while he doesn't really know anything about film, he did a good job of sort of explaining to me how like the blood shots work, like how people got shot and everything, and the blood packets. But I could not figure out how a dude melted on screen, and that blew my mind.
Oh, and that is neat, and you kind of need that, I would always have my mother say, I think this is how they film sex scenes. I would always have my dad say, this was a big deal at this time, no one had seen slow motion like this before. So everyone has a bit of film history in them, or remembers a certain movie because it was just, it had a certain reaction to it a certain way. If you mention something, everyone instantly goes, been a decade since I heard that one, for better or worse. And so I think it's interesting how many people mostly remember his movies, his movies have a certain appeal. You've seen him multiple times, and so you've had his satire is eventually kind of met its mark, and at the same time, some of his over the top stuff has really struck a chord with people who are watching it. Either for the content or emotionally or just plot wise. He has so many different layers, and so he's definitely the kind of onion that you don't expect.
He is, and also like you mentioned satire, and he's Dutch, so that's like it's kind of perfect for him to make American films because he's viewing at our ridiculousness, especially back in the 80s, and what he's seeing, he's viewing it from an outsider's perspective, which you couldn't ask for anything better because it offers a whole new perspective on things, and yet still feels very American because what he's talking about, especially in movies like RoboCop and everything, where he uses the media in that world, like in-world media, like news and stuff like that, to illustrate what's happening, in the world that he is building. And that's another sort of trope that I think that was around before him, obviously, but he really hammered that home as a really a good way to sort of like showing commercials on TV is a great way to build the world that these characters inhabit. And it seems like he really nailed that home with movies like RoboCop and whatnot.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And we don't have any particular order to this list. I think RoboCop is the first one we could definitely launch into because it not only sets up his style for the rest of his career, but it also, like you say, it's great from a inspiring filmmaker standpoint. It's great from other kind of movie buffs to observe. Just if you're going to have anyone talk about anything, you want to have someone who's like a scientist or a doctor give some exposition so it doesn't feel like crap. There's a reason to give you all this information. And newscaster is definitely secondary. You want to have some kind of opposition. What does the world think of this character? It's like, well, just have a character look on the TV screen,
Yeah. And all of that is great if he didn't have such a fantastic eye for special effects. He's also a great director because the acting in RoboCop is fantastic. And, at the end of the day, that is the director's number one job, is to direct the actors. But he does a great job of it. I picked up the Arrow, Blu-ray RoboCop release. Woo! And first off, I love everything Arrow puts out. Even movies that I've never seen, I'll sometimes pick them up if they're on sale. I just got like Kiss of Death with Sho Kosugi because it was like like $8 on Amazon. I was like, sure, I'll grab that. It's Arrow. But it looks so watching it in freaking 2020 on a 62-inch whatever hell we have now, LED screen TVs, and I'm watching this movie and it looks so goddamn good. Like RoboCop himself still looks so good. There's only like just barely a few times where you can be like, okay, that's foam and not metal. But for the most part, I am completely enthralled by that movie. I am completely like in that movie when I'm watching it. I'm never sitting there going, okay, I can see where this doesn't work or this is wonky or whatever. That I think the reason it holds up so well is first off, the special effects in that movie are amazing and they're practical. That's a big deal. And the acting is great too. It's really a perfect storm that should never have happened for a movie like RoboCop.
Absolutely. Because, Orion Pictures, same thing with like the Terminator. They didn't know what they were getting into. And it's so ironic because they basically are the, Omni Corporation of, of this movie where they just start commercializing everything. It's like it just shows you how stupid and just how much stuff went over everyone's head back then. It's like, this is an absolute anti-commercialism. This is making fun of the Reagan era, the just how the Wall Street tycoons, just everything, how no business is legal business. It's even in some ways kind of making fun of the police, not directly, just showing just like, if you need you're in trouble if you need a robotic cop to clean up crime.
Or even like, and I love the stuff that they're doing that I didn't get back then, like the whole military industrial complex, creating the Ed 209, and Ronnie Cox, like Dick Jones saying, I don't give a shit if Ed 209 works or not. We have like $1 billion contract with the military. Whether it works or not is moot. All that matters is that we have with the military. And that's the dialogue. That's the stuff that when I'm 42 years old, I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting, actually. Like that kind of insight into again, satirical insight in corporate America. And it's still relevant to today. It's remarkable how relevant RoboCop still is, and that's scary too.
Absolutely. That's exactly how I feel with many of the various political thrillers, spy movies, and even uh, other corporate and assassin type, thrillers. I look at them recently and I'm like, holy crap, we have not evolved as a society. They would just have like a certain just remark and everything is like, I know they didn't intend it that way, but you could use it this way, and that's how we're approaching terrorism. That's how we're approaching, again, societal norms.
Yeah.
That's pretty appalling. Is like entertainment mirroring today's world. But yeah, I mean, and there's so many other people. I talk it's amazing what just goes over people's heads. I tell them about, oh yeah, the Jesus Christ symbolism, and they look at me like I'm high on drugs. I'm like, really? You didn't understand that? You haven't heard that? Okay, watch it again. Oh, you're not going to? It's too violent. You don't think it would date well? Well, we'll have to agree to disagree.
And it's great for the director's cut of RoboCop is so much more violent, especially when Mr. Kinney gets destroyed by Ed 209 at the beginning of the movie. He on the director's cut, he unloads like a whole extra clip into Mr. Kinney. It's great.
I couldn't say it better myself. Even though this is often pretty edited, I watch edited movies all the time on TV. I think you can edit this for people or watch it uncut. It doesn't matter. It is one of those, everybody's going to watch it eventually. You should see it. I mean,
yeah,
we've talked about how it is just one of the few original superhero movies. And, I think that's part of why it's also kind of kept up, because it's definitely as satirical as any kind of comic book kind of movie.
And the fact that RoboCop is a good guy, he's kind of like Superman, where he will always do the right thing. And if he has something that, even if it's an internal directive that he can't override, he'll try to find a way to override it. And I think that also was what makes it hold up well, because we do need, sometimes in this world, we do need black and white characters. We do need the ultimate good person. I know sometimes it doesn't make for the best story, and I don't always necessarily love Superman stories, but I feel like there's still a need for characters like that. And I think RoboCop kind of filled that void where, a kid could go up to RoboCop and RoboCop would always protect him no matter what. And I think that's what really kind of, even though the movie's insanely violent and very, very hard R, I think the reason it was so accessible to kids, not just because RoboCop looks so cool, but it's because, no matter what, RoboCop would defend you, at least in RoboCop 1, we're talking basically. And he is like an ultimate good guy. And I think that we need more of those in the world. And it's cool and all, makes better stories for more of the gray superheroes. And, movies like The Boy or TV shows like The Boys and everything delve into that kind of stuff. But I like the idea that there should always still be an ultimate good character out there for people to just look up to. Use as an example, a symbol,
Basically it. I mean, years before we're having other movies try different formulas, steal each other formulas. I mean, the writer said he was explicitly just inspired by, Blade Runner and a few other crime movies, and just wanted to just kind of make some kind of surreal kind of movie, as well as just, and Verhoeven coming in, he just couldn't resist, so he was going to have a bit of other commentary and other stuff. And people seem to forget, commentary doesn't necessarily have to be in your face, like Oliver Stone or Spike Lee. It can be more kind of just, oh, gotcha, didn't see that coming. Just kind of, oh, I never thought of that. That's a wild Easter egg, and just, and this is years before everyone's trying to sneak in stuff like for special editions or only through computer green screens. It's like, no, this is all through just a little other subtext. And again, because people are so blind to either action or horror or even sci-fi and just think it's all popcorn only, unless it's by an acclaimed filmmaker, they just don't seem to realize a lot of people do know how to build their worlds and bring it to life on screen. It's just, again, until people get off their ass and realize, hey, you can enjoy any kind of movie, we're always going to have people who misunderstand or don't see that in the first version, and anyone can say what they want about the sequels, the shows, or even the remake. I think it's all relevant in some capacity because I mean RoboCop has just been one of those. It's every generation has seen it at some point, and they understand at least why the original film is just the to this day people still are talking about there might be an actual legit direct sequel like RoboCop Returns years. Yeah. I doubt it, but I mean, because Verhoeven just gave up Hollywood years ago. But I mean, it's also one of those that you can't blame them. It's just that immortal 80s movie, but it's more than just an 80s movie. It's more than just, an effects opus. It's more than just a action with some crime elements. That how rare
it's
was
RoboCop.
That?
It's like at this point, it's just RoboCop. Like meaning like it's its own genre. Most people, like you said, most people have seen it. You go up to somebody, hey man, you see RoboCop? Oh yeah, I love RoboCop. Like it's just at this point, it's just RoboCop.
I couldn't say it better myself. And I mean, to have just that kind of movie where rarely would I even see. I would see people do knockoffs of Terminator, even Universal Soldier. I've rarely seen anyone try and do knockoffs of RoboCop, even with the B movies and direct video crap that everyone saw eventually. Is like pretty much they didn't want to even touch it. They're just like, yeah, commercial. We'll do a knockoff of Demolition Man. We're not doing a knockoff of RoboCop. How does that work?
Exactly. Now, unfortunately, I do not know his Dutch work as much, so I'll mostly be commenting on his American stuff. But I love, and I'm looking through his IMDb. It's funny, going into this, looking into his IMDb. I thought he had more movies than he had done, because to me, he's such a big name. But, picking my top 5 are kind of the 5 that I love the most from him. I kind of, Showgirls is probably the only one that didn't really make my list. Everything else I didn't see. So like I essentially like everything that I see of his. Do you see what I'm saying? And I didn't realize that. At first, I knew there was a lot of Dutch stuff that I hadn't seen. As a content producer, it's kind of hard to consume content as well.
Exactly.
So I've been wanting to watch his Dutch stuff, but I didn't have a chance to. But I was a little bit surprised because like, oh, okay, let me pull my top 5, and I'm like, oh, what's pretty much all of his 5 that he made in America, in the U.S. and
right.
sans Showgirls. So I was like, oh, okay, so I guess I just love everything he does, and I'll probably love his Dutch stuff too. I just haven't been exposed to it really yet.
Well, and it doesn't help that, long story short, I mean, just even though the Criterion Collection and all those people have, released some of his stuff stateside, I pretty much still had to use online to just come across his stuff because it's just so out the ass expensive.
Mm-hmm.
and you can't even find it regularly, like even at a Best Buy or eBay. It's just like it's sold out so fast, or just limited supplies. Like it's so unreal. And it didn't help that he reused so many of the same people. You can find more about him coincidentally by reading Rutger Hauer's autobiography, All These Memories, which I unfortunately got to way late after a month after he had passed. I felt so bad. If there's any, I did make a list of Dutch movies to go by. If there's any movie that I think that pretty much got him in the door to making RoboCop and all the other MGM of Carloco movies, it would definitely be Flesh and Blood.
Okay.
This MGM HD, it also has a young Rutger Hauer, and it's basically, I think it's the most accessible out of all his movies because it's got all the action and the sleaze and just the abuse of power and awful bad guys who you root for their comeuppance, but it does so much commentary also on just kingdoms, and I'm surprised that people like the Game of Thrones type crowds haven't found this yet, because it is kind of one of those kinds of movies, where
I recognize the cover, and I'm like, while you're talking, I'm looking through the IMDb, and I do recognize it. Although I will say I know why I probably never would have watched it, even when I was younger. I was always more of a sci-fi guy than a sword and sorcerer guy.
right.
Very few sword and sorcery movies do I like, but I did like Game of Thrones. Actually, sort of got me to enjoy, not medieval because it's a whole different universe, but you know what I mean, that sort of style of storytelling or era. And Game of Thrones was helpful for that. But when I was a kid, I was just a huge sci-fi nerd.
I can't blame you. And I mean, you've talked about it in the past before, and I mean, especially just all the various Star Trek and Romero stuff where it kind of blends in, sci-fi and horror and all the other stuff. And this one is definitely one of those you do have to be in an absolute mood. But the older you get, the more you get into just goofy fantasy stuff, and you just learn to appreciate it all, regardless of your mood. It's like, I'm not a Harry Potter guy, but if you are, then I can understand you like that versus Hunger Games. If you want to just watch some more trashy, fun stuff like Beastmaster and Deathstalker, that's fine too. The Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones guy. Again, I get it. It all goes in various waves, various forms. You end up to kind of appreciate some degree of it all. Conan, Ator, and so
I did love Red Sonja and the first Conan movie when I was a kid.
There you go. And Hawk the Slayer. There's all these goofy movies. Conquest is another goofy one.
Lady Hawk with Rutger Hauer.
Here you go. And see, this would actually be an interesting double feature with Lady Hawk. Lady Hawk varies by crowd. Some people like it. Some people feel it doesn't date as well. I think it's just see it if you're a Rutger Hauer guy. And this is definitely one of those other ones. This is an interesting one, just seeing him as a villain. And this is another one. Verhoeven always barely got an R rating because he just has so much stuff. It's like, you cannot just tell people cover your eyes. It's like, there's some fucked up commentary and material in all his characters. And much like Basic Instinct, it is one of those, that one often comes on TV and they manage to modify it, but just barely, and this one, it would never be able to be shown on network TV. There's, Hollow Man and Starship, they were able to edit, show commonly on FX and Sci-Fi Channel. This one, I mean, there's a flat-out gangbang rape scene. There's, some other, and they don't show it graphically, but what's going on, and people are laughing maniacally. And so it would definitely, that would be the kicker on how far you're going to make it into the movie. But it's also just the other Kingdom stuff and Fuel stuff, and there's just too many scenes of people just walking around, in the nude or with gore on their armor. So it would not be able to be modified, Not even.
If anything, you've piqued my interest to see this movie.
So there you go. Yeah, and aside from that, since you've now gone into Game of Thrones type stuff, this would definitely appeal to so many people who would want to just see kind of even stuff. People who were more into stuff like HBO's Rome, just see kind of how, there's no fantasy elements, but there is just a medieval kind of mentality to it. It kind of reminds me of the 13th Warrior.
I like that movie.
Perfect. So, just that same kind of, but so many idiots just would bash it and just be like, it's a mindless Viking movie. I'm like, hardly. I mean, even if I hadn't liked it, God forbid, even if I had disliked it, I would never say it's mindless. I mean, there's so many people from different cultures meeting each other, and you see a lot of this, just people taking other land and basically becoming property. You get a lot of that kind of in your face kind of moments, and it's done well, as an understatement. And there are no happy endings in this movie, but I think Verhoeven is one of the rare people, because he is able to really, on a rewatch, you're at least able, so if you're going into this movie, if you're younger and everything, you caught it in the theater back in the day, you would have basically said, yeah, that was interesting, sword fight movie. Is like, you go back to it, is like, wow, this is very deep. And so I think this has some kind of audience. It is strikingly well shot by Jan de Bont. Again, the cinematographer. Long story short, well, actually, no, I'll leave that for when we talk about Total Recall. So basically, he's the other most successful Dutch filmmaker, having shot a lot of John McTiernan's work, like, Hunt for Red October, Die Hard movie, as well as director of the Speed films and Twister, and it's such a shame that he just vanished. He too just kind of went back to filming commercials and other Dutch movies that you can't get a hold of, and he just rarely appears for interviews. But just so this is years before he's doing other blockbusters like Flatliners and Lethal Weapon Free, and this is very he always knows how to do a mix of steady cam and tracking shots, shoulder mounts, mixed in with just establishing shots, and but ones that get your interest. And so me as an indie occasional filmmaker, I always get frustrated when I express to people I'm a visual filmmaker, and I'm not talking about just cheap shots or just improvise or even visual effects. I'm talking, I picture this in my head. This is how we're going to present this person, this close up, and it's just never fails. There's always someone who thinks, "Oh yeah," I'm like, no, I mean, we have two doves in the distance going over, flying over a mountain, and then we track to the guy who's losing his breath or frustrated that he's being hunted, stuff like that. And this is definitely one of those. You definitely in the 80s, you see so much good camera work. It used to be, it was very restricted to just TV, or the expensive art house movies. But you got Lawrence of Arabia worthy, just cinematography, just like, how did they shoot that? And Howard had already been on a TV show that was basically a comedic Dutch version of Zorro, basically, for lack of a better word. I forget the name of it. I don't know it. It very rarely was like an American TV. But so he and Verhoeven were already comfortable doing that, marching around in armor, getting the fill. Apparently Verhoeven, he often hints at what he wants from his actors, but he never tells them explicitly what he wants. So he pretty much gets you comfortable, and only rarely does he let some bad acting slip into his movies or just have people who don't know what they want. He's like, okay, you were never ready anyway. We just, you made an impression in the, casting room. So that's what happened. But this one, I mean, just all the other supporting actors are very good. And it's, Jennifer Jason Leigh is in this, and
this one's easier to find in America, right? Than the other ones.
Eventually you're going to find some video store that, that is showing this, and it'll range probably from $5 to $20 depending on what brand you're getting of it. But I think there's a Blu-ray release of it, and I'm sure you could come across it. But that's the second one I've picked so far, and I can't stress enough. Anyone who's a Verhoeven person, even if you're not going to go and do all the homework and look at it, you only like his action, sci-fi oriented or stuff, I think you should still seek this one out, because it's just very mind blowing, and in a Dogma 95 style where it just exists for argument sake. Right. Everything's pretty easy, and yet then you still have a few other just surprises in there that just make it all the more special. And the ending, I can talk about the ending nonstop, but I don't want to spoil it for others who haven't seen it.
Now I want to see it, so don't spoil it for me.
I definitely, spoiler in the future, I might have to bring it up if we rank the top 10 Rutger Hauer movies. Because how the character ends up, that's just vital to the performance, and how it's shot and everything. It's definitely one of those, just the final stay. I feel like I'm repeating myself. I do feel like it is it's also got just some creative battles. The stuff with the dynamite is very well thought out, because dynamite is hard to come by. So there's just Verhoeven. What he always does so well is just have little minor stuff in there, like, and it's just amazing how some people will just kind of be contrary to do it, and it's like, no, that is the joke, what you just said. He knows what he's doing. And so if you were to just say, oh, that's not the most accurate and everything, is like, that's exactly it. He's gonna do a little, but he's not exactly like the guy who did Walker or Repo Man, where you really have to be in the mood to understand it all. He's more of a, if you on the second or third rewatch, you'll realize this is not a stupid popcorn movie or a decent, laid-back movie. This is a very good movie. So please raise your rating from a 7 to a 8 or a 9, please. I'm done with that one. I can't recommend it enough. I think everyone's gonna really like all the layering and the dissecting of everybody, and the pain really pays off because you just root for everybody's just tragic outcall, and the battles also move the story forward. It's, Verhoeven does a good job, with violence. For me, he is the more kind of adrenalized David Cronenberg. He is more than just gonna blow up your head. He's also kind of gonna sugarcoat a few other things in there, but then once he's done babying you, he will just let it just wail on you.
And that's the one thing I always loved about Verhoeven, at least his American stuff, is I love his squibs. They're so chunky and big, and of course that is done also satirically as well. He it was by choice that these bullet holes when people get shot in his movies are so explosive, because he's just like, it's all satire. That's all, that when you look at it, you're like, okay, it's fun, but like your point you're saying, he's also makes it very entertaining. So when you're just watching it for the first time, or you're casually watching something like Robocop, you're like, oh, I'm just having a good time. There's the blood packets are huge, but then you start distilling everything down, you start picking pieces apart, and you realize that every single thing is done by design, down to how explosive the blood packets, the squibs are, because it's all there to service the satire that the satirical story that he is telling.
Exactly. And it becomes later on, definitely on his last few ventures with Loco Pictures. For those who don't know, most of those guys have passed away. They were responsible for many other Planet Hollywood franchises, Die Hard with a Vengeance, the first 3 Rambo movies, Terminator 2 and 3, and just, in the 80s and 90s, they were eating it up, but they were very heavily involved, and, they were also from European influence, so they had, they were pretty much the Millennium Films of their day.
Yeah. Not quite canon, though. Not quite canon.
No, not at all close to canon, but, and unfortunately, they went bankrupt after a while, but, for a while, Verhoeven was their go-to with their various movies, and they, it's one of they definitely were the ones, they embraced it all, and with this one, they were very good with just motivating him, saying, okay, you want this kind of actor, this kind of actor, okay, cool.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new podcast Cure-All, sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday, we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time. Tangents galore.
Yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We might talk about video games,
Music.
Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Ah, yes.
I am the master storyteller
Yes.
of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out the Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers,
Yes.
the Google Play,
Yes.
Apple Podcasts,
What else?
Podbean,
What else?
Podcast Addict,
Goddamn.
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, motherfucking hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ.
Ah.
We gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair to say
Ah. Ah.
all
Yeah.
that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
Yeah. don't run the listeners away, PJ.
Ah, I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we'll end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinema Punks. Cinepunks. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, Prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
all popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be
did
a
you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. Whether one last plot holes or gratuitous movies, it's time to get busy with your friend Steven Izzy at eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zamenhof. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zamenhof, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zamenhof, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She Podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zamenhof.
Hi everybody, it's Mac Jackson. I wanted to invite you to a new site called the Forever Adventure Network. This website has everything. Pictures, videos, blogs. There's original music by Harmony Constant, 2 podcasts. One is the MacGyver podcast, where we celebrate Richard Dean Anderson, his iconic roles, and how it's influenced our lives. There's episode discussions, interviews, and life conversations. The second podcast is the Never Gets Old podcast, where we celebrate all the best things that we love in life, from TV, movies, music, and comics. The site is also the home for the MacGyver SG-1 audio series, an ongoing adventure series that continues the adventures of MacGyver and SG-1. There are also multiple stores to choose from for all of your pop culture and adventure needs. Come on by and check us out today. And thanks for joining the adventure.
Are you sick of the same old stale podcasts? Well, then join Vanessa and Darren as they dissect movies of all kinds. The 2 lifelong cinema lovers bring their favorites, curiosities, and first-time watches to the operating table and inject them with a healthy dose of snark. Then there's the waiting room, where they examine books and short stories. So just look for them on Apple Podcasts and where fine podcasts are available. They're part of the Legion Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at VD Clinic Pod. Join them on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/VD Clinic Pod, or email them at vdclinicpod@gmail.com. They're ready to cure what ails you. And still, they just might be a little contagious.
We now continue with our program.
But let's get them. So I guess we could move on to Total Recall if that's okay, because I think that's
would that be Total Recall? That's an inside joke for myself. I apologize to you and everybody else. A buddy of mine, calls it Total Recall, and now I was amused so much by it that I can't not call it Total Recall anymore. But yeah, that was just for me. I apologize to your listeners. Yeah, that's on my list. I actually put mine in order, but in Robocop was number 1, by the way. But yeah, Total Recall. Total Recall is on my list. And side note, my wife loves this movie as well, and I saw this in the theater when I was, I guess, 12 years old at that time. And there was another one. I mean, I was an Arnold kid growing up. Everyone was like, "Are you Sylvester Stallone? Are you into Sylvester Stallone movies? Or into Arnold movies?" I was an Arnold kid. I was a Jason Voorhees kid. Because you had to have your camps. And I was a Star Wars kid versus Star Trek. So Arnold, I love Arnold. Always have. Always loved Arnold movies. Love Predator. Also, I think it's too. Arnold tended to do kind of sci-fi stuff. I think he never shied away from that, and I always kind of really dug that. But Total Recall is such a cool movie, and another example of what you're saying about RoboCop and Flesh and Blood is that there's, when you watch it casually, it's just fun. It's just fun. But when you start picking it apart and start analyzing it, you start thinking like, wait a minute, is he really under? Like, did that whole thing happen at the end? Like, there's actually these open-ended questions. Did all this really happen? Is it all just a part of his Total Recall experience, and everything? And then you start realizing, you're like, wait a minute, this isn't just a dumb sci-fi Arnold Schwarzenegger action movie. It's got things to say, and everywhere, just like RoboCop, it's got things to say about social norms all over the place. Just Hollywood. He's taught. He's also making fun of Hollywood and stuff. It's so interesting. But like all of his other stuff, Total Recall, it's fun on the surface level, but when you dig deeper, it's still fun. It's still such a fun movie to watch. But there's so much more there than you originally thought.
I could not have said it better. This is definitely one of those. There's plenty of people who won't even bother with this because they're like, "Oh, this inspired other cyberpunk stuff like Minority Report, The Matrix. So I don't like those. I don't want to watch this." And it's like, no, please watch this. And I don't like Arnold. Well, then there's nothing to talk about. But you should still watch this. This is one of those. Verhoeven, it doesn't matter what the actor is or how infamous they later became. He knows how to use them, at least in the context of his. This is cool seeing again Ronnie Cox and once again another villain role. Michael Ironside was around the same time doing Total Highlander 2, so it's funny seeing him in this one and then later in that one.
Yeah, I love me some Ironside, man.
Yeah, and like you say, is like you watch it on TV, is like it's pretty intense, but you would have no idea this is borderline, X-rated, and then it's definitely one of those. It definitely spoofs, Star Trek as well as even Die Hard 2 from around the same year. Just the airport scene, Mm-hmm. You would never have that in an American movie. I mean, yeah. The hero is in there and he's getting more people killed as a result. That's pretty funny, darkly.
Yeah, when he uses that poor sap on the escalator as the human shield. Now, of course, he is our hero, so that poor sap was already shot by the villain before he used him as a human shield. But the fact that he's still using him as a human shield is pretty awesome. Not gonna lie.
Absolutely, and these guys are basically Gestapo, so I'm sure Verhoeven has some allusions there. Yeah. Instead of the Holocaust, this is basically becoming just a massacre. It's true. The ending, like you say, definitely the red pill, blue pill. Most people refer to that or any other kind of Alice in Wonderland logic. But nowadays, other people are like, "Wow, The Matrix was inspired by this." Even so, fun fact. So Jan de Bont, who did not work on this, but cinematographer, it's often been joked about in various blogs. You can find a lot of stuff on this, that Jan de Bont basically betrayed his mentor Verhoeven because he basically snatched up the rights to do a sequel to this.
Oh.
And ironically, I guess Verhoeven didn't really know about it, but you could say he had the last laugh because it always would never pan out. And eventually it got rewritten by a former Homeland security expert in the wake of 9/11, and then it came across Spielberg's people and became a little-known movie called Minority Report.
Oh, that was supposed to be Total Recall Part 2, huh?
So there you go. And Jan de Bont, is credited as a producer, even though none of his, changes, retained. But that's just how it works. That's always the compromise. If you worked at it at some point during development, hell, you still get a producer credit.
Yeah.
Even if it's just I gave it to another producer to give across to their desk, and that's how such and such movie got made. But I have to bring up the video game and the TV show. The TV show, I'll just say this, it's a very boring Showtime show. I saw it on Hulu in edited form, and it was like Skinamax, but just like barely even entertaining in that respect. It was just very boring. They would often show it edited on Sci-Fi Channel, and the pilot was often available as the first 2 episodes were available as like a 2-hour movie.
Okay.
On some of those Mill Creek, Miramax, multi movie packs, and people made a fuss out of it because it's got other famous Canadian actors. Martin Sheen appears as a board member in the opening episode. It doesn't make a lick of difference. It's just more of a Blade Runner sequel than it is Total Recall. But
what year did that come out? I've never even heard of that Total Recall show.
It was 99. It was it was shown on Showtime. Then they broadcast remaining episodes on. It was one of the other ones. They just moved it to Sci-Fi and syndication, and it still didn't do well in ratings, so they just pulled it anyway.
I was 99. I think I was in college at that point. So yeah, I didn't have cable. I was too busy, drinking and trying to get through film school in Towson University, but in Maryland.
Yeah,
but
you didn't miss anything. Altered Carbon is more of a true Blade Runner Total Recall sequel.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Ironically, though, have you ever been tempted to play the Minority Report video game?
What system did that come out for?
Let me look it up real fast. I know I had it on PlayStation 2. I could have sworn there was a GameCube version, but let me look.
I had a PlayStation 2 and I had a GameCube, but I never played Minority Report. That's for sure.
It was always a lot of fun, and it was one of those I would play with my brother. We would switch off. Okay, yeah. So it was released for all of them. It was developed by Fox Interactive, Treyarch, and yeah, it was released for Game Boy Advance, GameCube, and Xbox, just like I thought. But I would always see it, but I always got it used years later. And ironically, this is more like Total Recall. I mean, don't get me wrong. The movie itself has its moments, but this is way more over the top and violent. Like all the time, you can throw cops in front of each other, use them as body shields without pulling a Grand Theft Auto, your heat waves up.
Yeah.
And the player looked and was voiced by Clancy Brown.
Oh.
So this is definitely where he gets a high kill count, and it's not from all the other stuff. So it's cool to see. Again, here's another Highlander Starship Troopers connection. It's a lot of fun, and people should watch it just because it's just one of those best angry at the world, not so PC movies. And I don't mean to say that, for today's neo-Nazi society. I mean to say that it's just a fun, mindless, over-the-top game. It was basically a precursor to stuff like Just Cause and all this other stuff.
Okay. Wow, I'll have to look that up. That one, went under my radar. I think I had an aversion to licensed, games back in. That being said, there were a few that slipped under the radar that were pretty impressive, like Robocop versus Terminator for Super Nintendo.
Oh man, yeah, talk about a very cool game that should have become a movie, and everyone would always mock it because those sequels became infamous after a while, and it's like, this is another one. It had a C or a D on every single review site, and so I had Amazon not been so helpful back in the day, saying, "No, this is so much fun. It's a mindless yet very interactive game." I never beat it, but it was one of those, just the cutscenes were fun. If you let it the screen just kind of fade away after a while, it would just have random just Easter eggs and characters dancing in the background. It was a nutty game. It was don't let the Metacritic, 54 out of 100 score dissuade you. If you are looking for some used PlayStation games to kill time at, you'll have a lot of fun with this one.
Nice. I'll have to keep an eye out for that one.
Yeah, if it's like on the $3, Entertainment shelf, you can definitely snatch it up. But yeah, it was by Activision. It's definitely it will always be my top 10 in there somewhere, just because it is just so outrageously violent, and it's rated T. But don't let that dissuade you. I mean, you're having some fun tech, some fun armor and gadgets you can use, and it's just, and you can steal people's jetpacks and just use it around without running out of fuel. It's so much fun. I can't say enough.
I'm looking it up as you're talking.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, Total Recall definitely is one of those. I think for those who, it's a perfect double feature with RoboCop and even Blade Runner, because it does get a little emotional near the end. It launched, it made so many other character actors become better known as a result. Rachel Ticotin, I associated with this movie so much. And then there's Sharon Stone, and then there's Ironside, and then there's Cox, and then there's even Robert Picardo, future Star Trek Stargate actor, as the voice of the robot and the cab driver.
Yeah, he was also in The Howling. He was the Eddie
yes,
Yep.
Yeah. So
which I still don't even see. Like The Howling is one of my favorite werewolf movies, and every time I see him, I still don't see Picardo there. Like it's just like I know you're Picardo, but I do not see you as Picardo at all.
It is one of those. Is like blink and a miss. Is like really, because he was commonly in movies by this person, so it's just easy to and his screen time is very limited, especially if you count the number of shots. I don't think he has a single close-up. So it is one of those, like, yeah, it's easy to just miss him each time, because the Screen Actors Guild rules are so weird. He's practically a featured extra. And Howling's a good counterpoint. This is definitely one of those, if you were not the most open-minded person, you would think, okay, yeah, this is an over-the-top movie. It's like, yeah, but no, this has so much heart. This has the proper references to other movies as well that are going to take multiple rewatches, but it's not like today's world where a homage is just so forced out to where you're like, yeah, you just flat out just copied it. You didn't even, add your two cents.
Subtlety. There's no art form to the homage anymore. It's just, it's like, let's just put it there. Let's just quote the thing. And yeah, I think that probably came from the Tarantino / Kevin Smith era. Yeah, we're our homage is we just quote it like that's not an homage. You're just quoting it. That's all you're doing.
And Brian De Palma gets a lot of shit for it, but truth be told, he was in love with Hitchcock, so he lived and breathed that. There's a big difference there, and he does plenty of other subtleties and graphicness that Hitchcock would never dare take. Yeah. So, if anything, he's just, I call him the just next to Ken, the son of Hitchcock. He has plenty of Hitchcock moments, but he does it with love, so it's hardly just a flat out steal. Right. Compared to, you look at Mission Impossible 3, it stills almost frame for frame the True Lies bridge ambush.
Yeah.
Before just letting Tom Cruise do his thing, to where it's like, seriously? Come on. It's like, it's more than just, when I watch, all these Millennium Films movies, I know that they're in love with all the 80s movies. And even if they force it or don't do a half-assed job, I just eat it up anyway, because I know there was still some expensive stuff that went into it.
Yeah.
And I look at all the other mainstream stuff, and it's just like, but that wasn't even good on paper. This one, Total Recall, is definitely one that I see kind of the most imitated, the go-to for people making a cyberpunk sci-fi stuff, because in recent years, people have realized it doesn't have to be just direct-to-video, goofy, made-for-TV B movie or TV show. It can actually be a big scale movie. And Recall, they definitely influenced a lot by, and unfortunately, it doesn't matter how you market it. At the end of the day, nowadays, everyone has to market it more kind of like Inception or Matrix, but this is overall the same general crowd. People who like those kind of mixture of genres, and just, like you say, that this is a bigger, more far... this is basically the Omni, Robocop corporation, if it's more than just, well, that futuristic, Earth society. This is, if they went to Mars.
Yeah.
and
Like they're running the entire Mars, essentially. It would be if Omni, Consumer Core was running Mars, and it's like one guy against the entire planet versus one cyborg guy versus, just a corporation. But yeah, it is that concept escalated bigger, and I still think we're going in that direction. It's the Aliens scenario where corporations, Weyland Yutani is going to own the planets that we go to in the future, and it'll be Amazon planet and and Lyft planet, and Uber planet, crap like that, stupid shit like that. And
if Trump goes to Mars,
exactly, that's basically what call is. But I will say I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I almost can never say the words 2 weeks without afterwards putting my hands in my mouth going 2 weeks. And if I'm in public, people are like, well, what are you doing? That's weird. And I'm like, I can't. You don't understand. I can't hear or say the words 2 weeks without doing that.
You're right. It is just one of those is like, okay, just referencing a movie. I'm sorry you're stuck up your ass about this. Please just watch the movies. Watch the movie. You'll know what I mean when you see it. And
most people do know the 2 weeks thing, because a lot of times like, are you doing Total Recall? yes, I am.
Thank God I'm not so fortunate. The most I'm gonna get is howdy Quaid. And they're like, oh, Dennis Quaid? No, howdy Quaid. Oh, you're still not getting it. Fuck you.
Yeah, that's another one. If I hear the name Quaid, like Randy Quaid or something, I'll have to go Quaid,
right?
It'd be like Quado.
Exactly. You got to emphasize it. It's like howdy stranger.
And I know if I was Quaid, I never wanted to touch Quado's hand because I hated how wet it looked. Oh God, it's so gross. I hate you, Quado. I hate you.
Yeah, and apparently the ABC TV version of this, when it premiered back in the day, was very confusing. You know how violent the scene is when he's almost terminated by one of his coworkers, and it, ends in the death in the alleyway. That's when he first kills, and he's all freaking out. He's all gory and anything. He's muscular, but he is not used to this. And it's both funny and just, shocking. And, it's one of those, they just knock him out and you go to commercial break. And then you come back, apparently. I had various people tell me about this on the forums, and he's already running again. Like, what did I miss?
There's like, we can't fix this for TV. We're just going to cut it out completely.
There were no alternate frames of this. And so it's so funny how Arrow's version of Robocop, as well as Universal's recent party edition of stuff like Scarface, have embraced this. It's been so cool to where you can jump to have the TV edits as well as the kill counters and
I mean,
profanity counters.
Yeah, with pop culture, I feel like, Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon was probably like one of the first, like the first time when like that is such like a deep cut, pop culture. But
Farmer.
but people could like, but the stiffs, as Venkman would call them, the stiffs, they would get it, they would understand. But I love how now we as film nerds have like, we've embraced these things that we hated as a kid. We all hated the TV edit, but now that we're older and we've seen RoboCop 1,000 times, we're like, well, crap, let's see what the TV edit has, and because it has a bunch of amazing stuff in it, like
even exclusive scenes that aren't even in the deleted scenes. There's apparently that's the case with The Perfect Weapon. There you actually hear Mariska Hargitay actually talk. She doesn't talk in the American and the theatrical version. So like you say, there's just all this stuff is like, I wish they would release an extended version of these movies, because those who got introduced to it on regular TV, that was all we had. And like you say, sometimes you would just watch the movie because you've seen it a billion times and you're bored and you just want to see it, despite all the commercials and just the stuff. And unfortunately, TNT has just not taken as much love to it, even though they and the other channels have recently started playing a lot of movies on cut. I cannot watch their versions of even The Expendables or Olympus Has Fallen, because in both they take out the villain's final death scene. And it's like, those are like the least graphic out of all the carnage on screen. And don't have me watch all these people befell and encounter violence and not see the awesome, foul one-liner followed by the graphic knife and gunshot death. it's just one of those is like, because for one of those they just cut to the villains, and then the character said, the characters have both shot the person to death, and they say instead they just go to, oh, let's call it a tie. It's like, it doesn't make sense. All I see is their body on the floor. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
And TBS still shows this version of Die Hard 2 to date. I commonly saw Total Recall on there, and it was always a lot of fun. And TNT occasionally still shows it late at night at 2 a.m. And it is one of those, is like, you can see where they're making the edits, but it's not intrusive. But it is one of those, is like, it's kind of darkly even more humorous. Is like, oh, I see what you did. No one knows that the stabbing death is way more graphic. There's blood spurting all over Arnold's face. And normally I don't like animal deaths, but the rat death is actually very hysterical. It's just because it just illustrates the villains more.
Yeah.
To them, that's all Arnold's character is, just another rat.
Yeah.
And it's so fun. Like you say, this movie does do a good job of just showing how, just because they're a ruthless corporation doesn't mean they're good at their job. They are sloppy. They're not trying to hide their presence. They're basically both the police and everything else. So they're just basically, for all we know, they're probably killing the families of these widows and all these other
for
people
sure.
who got
Yeah,
slaughtered.
exactly.
Or killing, and if they're not killing them, then they're just paying them off. It's like, we're so sorry, it won't happen again. This is dark watching this in a Black Lives Matter post economy. Is like, Jesus. So they're not only just shooting on sight, but I mean, people laugh about seeing, the laser sights and everything. These guys, I mean, they can't even point the lasers the right way, but they illustrate that perfectly. I mean, the coworkers who are in on the pay, they're not good at killing Arnold. They're just only good at just throwing a punch and talking shit. Bet you didn't expect that, did you? And so that gets you in the mood for all this over-the-topness. And see, today's movies, they just introduce over-the-top stuff, but they don't give you enough to get used to it, to where you're like, oh, okay, I know what I'm in for.
Yeah.
And it's just, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of snobs who will argue about the silliest things. I'm like, seriously? You had a problem with that movie compared to this movie? I mean, the first 10 minutes should have been enough,
It should have told you what you're in store for right there.
Yeah, I shouldn't. If you didn't know that it was going to be unrealistic, then you really are this dumb. But speaking of running, they're not only doing a bad job of running the planet, but this does kind of parody Arnold's previous roles with sci-fi, like, the violence of Terminator, as well as just the other cyberpunk adventure, The Running Man. And so I was more of a Total Recall guy growing up, but Running Man I eventually became a huge fan of. It is one of those, along with Predator, you cannot not like it as an Arnold fan. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, you won't necessarily like it on the first go round, but please rewatch it. You'll get something out of it, especially with how crappy reality TV is now. I secretly want to do a version of Running Man or Total Recall, but with the cast of Whose Line Is It Anyway? Imagine imagine how there you go. Imagine how in the future we might not have a Mad Max society, but we might have people they want to see the next step of wrestling. They want to see you go all the way and actually injure people.
I'm surprised we haven't gotten to that now. Just,
Right?
using people like exactly like Running Man, using people on death row. And I don't. First off, I don't really necessarily believe in capital punishment, but it's there and they're there, and I'm surprised we haven't dipped into that yet. I mean, it's a good thing. It's a very good thing that societally we haven't done that yet. But I am surprised that it hasn't gone there yet.
Yeah, much like I've had to argue with people who are still looking at old statistics, is like, no, cops are not in danger. Other people are in danger from cops. All the cop fatalities have been from crooked cops or other scandals, Rampart type stuff. Same thing with porn. Everyone's like, oh, all these people still are brainwashed to think, don't teach sex ed. I'm like, no, teach sex ed so that your kid doesn't impregnate someone. There is no other in between of that. And same thing with porn. Let them watch porn.
As somebody who worked at an adult video store for 10 years, I'm fine with that.
Exactly. You much rather, you have less responsibility. You realize, you know what, I'm actually not ready to, get into this serious relationship.
Exactly.
And then there's same thing with video games. Everyone's like, oh, it'll encourage them to get violent. No, bullshit. it'll resist the urge, and all the stuff that everyone's connected with it. It's been the same thing as with violent movies. The people who are, it's like the guy who shot Ronald Reagan. He had seen Taxi Driver a million times. He was planning something like this, and he just needed inspiration.
Yeah.
It is not the other way around, where everyone's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you will instantly become a psychopath if you're playing this all day." Nope, that is so not it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. As someone who literally spent their entire life watching insanely violent movies by Paul Verhoeven and playing violent video games and reading violent comic books, I am not that. I've never been in a fight before, so that should tell you, everything you need to know there. I'm kind of a wimp.
Exactly. There were plenty of violence movies we would grow up with, and it's like, yeah, I don't have the stomach for that, or I can watch it at least once. I like talking about it. I don't like watching it.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of movies. Again, movies just kind of made us find our voice. I did better on an essay just because I was able to use parallels and certain mystery novelists better to depict my parallels and just illusions that I'm trying to get across versus I read, War and Peace and 100 fucking times. No, I even when I couldn't necessarily grasp the script to screen, I understood. I read reviews. I read why I disagree so heartily with this, or why I think this movie is a guilty pleasure or good but not high art. And so I think everyone goes through that cycle, especially the video store days and comic books, and just basically you're figuring out your mentality, your persona versus why you like what you like.
And I'm the same way. I kind of grew up utilizing like male characters in movies to kind of frame how I sort of wanted to be.
Exactly.
Mainly because my dad. I mean, my dad and I have a great relationship now, but he wasn't really around that much when I was younger. So I kind of looked up to these characters, and I always look up to characters that are kind of nothing like me. I'm very outspoken and soft, whereas I look up to characters like Hicks from Aliens. It's the quiet, strong guy. Mad Max. Max Rockatansky, Boba Fett. It's all these characters that are silent and cool, which is exact opposite of me. But they did help me kind of have these little weird father figures in my life when I didn't have one, growing up I didn't know that I was doing that. You know what I mean? But even now to today, I'll still use like films to illustrate how I'm feeling, films to illustrate how I'm thinking, or what I like, what I want to accomplish, or who I want to be. Films is what I use to kind of, when I'm talking to somebody as an example, but also in my own head, kind of like, this is my barometer. And maybe that's not, realistic. Obviously it's not, it's these are fictional characters and everything, but they meant something to us, and everybody has characters that mean something to them. And I think as I get older, I definitely dive more into the characters. I like to kind of figure out their backstory. I like to figure out what got them to where they were and stuff like that. But when I was younger, I would use these male characters to kind of, try to mimic and be like, and as much as I loved Arnold, he was never in that category, because it was like, well, I'm never going to be that big. So it's just, he was more for like, he's fun. But I do love me some Arnold. I really, really do. I think he's fantastic. But yeah, it's these movies are, for me, they're about the characters, dude. Truly, like at the end of the day, it's the characters and just how realistic they are, or if they're doing stuff that is logical to that character in that moment in that movie. That's the kind of stuff that I love, when the writer and the director knows that character so well that they don't betray that character in the writing.
I think that's the best way of saying it, because it's definitely one of those. You and Zach mentioned, I can't remember which of you got into teaching, because you were
Zach did.
Right. And I shared a lot of his frustration, because people would show movies in class, but they wouldn't tell you what it was about. They just wanted to shut up because, it has some relevance. And I think, like you say, is like, movies are supposed to just be larger than life, but look a certain way, feel a certain way, be out of this world. And yeah, seeing people like Bean and Arnold were definitely one of many people who I would just relate to. And everyone just wants to be critical of how their acting was and everything. It's like, yeah, but no, they became the character.
Yeah.
They were right for the role. They made you feel this certain way. Is like, I'm not that way at all, but I want to be, or I want to at least have someone like that on my side as a friend who's flawed.
Right. Yeah.
And
no, I want Hicks to as a kid I wanted Hicks to be my dad, and not, again, nothing against my dad, but
even
it
Kyle
was like,
Reese.
yeah, even Kyle Reese, except he should have put on some underwear before he put on that dirty man's dirty jeans. But what are you gonna do?
Right. Exactly.
Even when I was a kid, I was like, ew, that's gross, Kyle. That's gross.
Yeah, and it never got easier from there.
No, it was a downward spiral for old Kyle Reese from there.
Perfect. So that's 3 movies of ours so far.
Yes.
I'm just gonna mention 5 different movies. 6, my bad. That Verhoeven did, just so it's just kind of easier.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Spetters, Turkish Delight, Black Book, L, and Soldier of Orange. All these movies, absolute, just in short, absolute must-sees, because they you see a lot of Verhoeven's war drama in it, influence in it. You also see, again, much like with Basic Instinct and Robocop, just the wanting to belong, even Flesh and Blood, people being used by other people for corporate greed or for sexual pleasure and everything, and becoming victims as a result, doing it without becoming exploitation level. And, Verhoeven's been accused of that before, and it's like, no, he's commenting on exploitation. In many ways, he's making those kinds of movies.
I never think of Verhoeven as exploitation. Like even Hollow Man, he's doing, like, Verhoeven himself is like doing exploitation type of things in the movie with, like, say, for example, the lady getting molested by the invisible hand. And as well as I do, half the reason they did that is because they were just like, let's see if we can make a CGI boob. Like, it's like, that they are doing it for fun, but at the same time, it wasn't especially in Hollow Man, it's not inserted in there for just to have an invisible, like, have a CGI boob. That's exploitation. It's in there to illustrate the madness that character is going through and how he was always hollow on the inside. And
it's not CC by today's standards, but it's just showing you it's making fun of the original, 40s, monster movies, much like. However, unlike, some of the other schlocky stuff that Sony did at around the same time, like Anaconda and everything, it might be heavy-handed in certain areas, but it's also trying to be like just saying, hey, if I was a mad scientist, would I do this? And it's like, yeah, of course, he's an unstable guy, so he's abusing other people, and it's just it. It shouldn't have even been made here. It should have been made overseas.
Oh, Hollow Man?
Probably. I think just so many people... I understand that there's a lot of underwritten stuff, but there's also plenty of other stuff that I think it benefits, especially from Kevin Bacon, because he's already played characters like this, in other movies like Flatliners and everything. Just people were not ready for this kind of thing. They were just like, it got over advertised. They're like, oh, it's a B movie. I'm like, yeah, well, everything was kind of a B movie at some point. The original Terminator is, Indiana Jones is a B movie, Alien, Star Wars, those are making fun of older serials and everything. So that's hard to come across and build that kind of thing. And I mean, Verhoeven admitted he was a merc on it, but this is one of those, we can politely agree to disagree with, the director versus the entertainment value of the actual movie. I think it's worth a watch. You should still see it, whether you see it on cable or whatever, because it is interesting just seeing just how just the tech makes it worth a watch.
I love that movie. Honestly, I wish like somebody like Arrow or somebody would put out a good version of it on Blu-ray, because it's 20 years old at this point. Like, first off, holy shit. I can still like remember seeing it in the theater like it was yesterday. But I found that movie to be very entertaining, and I love the invisible boob grope. I mean, you don't call me Sleazy C on Podcast After Dark for nothing. I mean, I was like, hey, I love seeing that shit. Yeah, sometimes, you know what? Sometimes a movie needs just a dash of sleaze in it, and I feel like we're kind of missing that these days. It's either you are a sleazy movie and then you're just a sleazy movie, but Verhoeven did a great job of just sprinkling in the sleaze, and it was okay because it all fits under the satire.
We knew he wasn't a perv in real life. We were just showing, hey, he's this over the top kind of guy.
Yeah.
And for better or worse, it was interesting just seeing, just for lack of a better word, just seeing a kind of guy who, I mean, again, you got the evil corporation and you got the guys who are like, we're not, it's got a little minor, this went over everyone's heads. I thought that this did a good job of also showing how like medicine kind of parallels to the AIDS virus, and how you could even do that with Corona nowadays. People want to just take the first drug that they feel less shabby about and just put it on the market. And here he's like, people are experimenting with this, but after a while they're like, what are we researching again? And it's just showing you it's like no one is communicating with each other. And then, how lo and behold, you got a guy who's unstable, who hates people, who wants to just kind of use this to abuse people. And so it's like, okay, that's a pretty interesting parallel. And yeah, this could easily be like all the other corporations and Verhoeven's other movies. But for whatever reason, it was just one of those, it always went over everyone's head. They always were like, oh, it's a shitty screenplay with some fun visuals. Like, I think you're just not paying attention, or you're just, because it's not Shakespeare, you just got to throw the little guy under the bus.
Yeah. And that was like his last big U.S. film, wasn't it? Hollow Man.
That's the one that made him give it up. And I feel like that's a perfect segue. Starship Troopers and Basic Instinct, I think you said, are on your list.
Yes, they are. I'll say I have a lot more to say about Starship Troopers than Basic Instinct.
Okay, yeah, I gotta actually jump on another call, unfortunately, but Troopers, I was able to actually my brother always remembered seeing the Roughnecks CGI cartoon that predated.
I had
Halo.
that. By the way, I have that. We are going to be doing it as an episode of TV Obscura on Podcast After Dark. I love that.
Awesome.
I love that show.
Oh, that's fantastic. I look forward to that one. This is another one. Again, my parents think it's just a stupid movie, with some interesting actors, and my uncle's the only one who really got it. And this was definitely another one. I was a fan of the book, was disappointed that wasn't like the book. Then I realized, the book is basically a Nazi book, and this is the anti-Nazi thing. I introduced my brother to it again when we went and saw the Riff Tracks live event, and it was one of those, the riffs were just as hysterical, even though I legit liked the movie.
Yeah.
And they admitted that they felt, oh shit, I hope Casper Van Dien is in the audience. I don't want to piss him off, and it was I saw it twice. It was a lot of fun. And
I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I love Starship Troopers. It wasn't my number one. It was actually my number two. I was gonna put on the list, and I saw it in the theater. I saw it, I think, 3 times opening weekend. I have the board game of Starship Troopers.
Oh, awesome!
I think Avalon Hill or Avalon Press put it out, but it's it's Planet P, where they all kind of had that siege, and you have to kind of get there, and you have little character representations of Radchek and all that kind of stuff, but a big part of that movie I love. I'm a self-proclaimed armor-phile. I love Colonial Marines armor. But I also love the Starship Trooper armor, even though it's not the mech suits, and they've done the mech suit stuff in the CGI cartoons. They put out that cartoon, that TV series, but then they also put out some like Starship Troopers movies. Nothing is as good as the original. I actually like the the armor that they're wearing. I like the aesthetic of the movie better than anything that they did in the cartoons with the CGI armor. Maybe they just didn't have a good designer for the armor. You know, it wasn't iconic, but I thought they nailed it with the movie armor. And I love the fact that they made so many pieces of armor for people, because that movie didn't use, like, nowadays if you filmed it, you would fill in the ranks in the background with like CGI characters, but back then they just
having trouble logging. I'll call you here in a bit.
They had
Sorry
you know
about that.
me?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
I just got interrupted.
No worries.
We'll wrap this call up in a bit. Sorry, I got someone else who.
No worries.
That is very true. It's very easy to cosplay as it. There's many sites that sell their own customs, and I feel like this is in the same universe as Total Recall. Just the corporation alone, they took over the Senate and everything. And I have revisited the sequels as well. The CGI cartoons I prefer more, the movie CGI ones, even though they're unremarkable. But looking at the schlocky direct-to-video sequels, they're worth still rewatching, even though there's a lot of wrongness. There's still some interesting stuff in their second portions, just showing how basically this is an unwinnable war and everybody's just a fall guy.
Yeah.
This is basically Starfleet if they were even more bureaucratic and impotent. And I remember one person even once described it as Star Wars: The Phantom Menace meets Platoon in there back when I read tons of early Amazon reviews, and I thought it was perfect. I was like, that's exactly it. This is, and Casper Van Dien deserves to be a bigger star, but he's thankful just to be remembered for Johnny Rico, and I don't think this Sony reboot movie that's upcoming will have any justice on it. Troopers by itself should be embraced. It is always one of those you have to find the right people to watch it with, because someone will always take it as exact face value. And Neil Patrick Harris is just fabulous in this. Dina Meyer.
There's a lot of nudity in it. I mean, there's violence, nudity, giant space bugs getting blown in half. It's got literally, Starship Troopers has everything. It should be the most popular movie ever made, in my opinion.
It really should. And once as a whole, it is one of those movies that I think there's always someone who rediscovers it and is in on the joke. Casper has described it himself. People on both political sides even draw to it, which is wild, because this is definitely, it was one of those that came out around the Gulf War, and then people started reanalyzing it, on the other Middle Eastern conflicts and, other recent incidences. So I think it is one of those, people are slowly coming around to it. It's just, 3 decades too late.
Yeah. And the only thing I'll end on is saying that Rico should have shot Radchek in the head, not in the chest. So where the bullet had to go through the armor, like when he's like sitting there dying, he's like, "Oh, Rico, you know what to do."
He's not yet a man, and then by the end, remember, then he starts shooting people in the face, and it's like, shit, it's just showing you how he's still a good old boy, and it's just, and all the other actors, I light up anytime I see him in other movies. Clancy Brown has reprised the role in the cartoon, and he was an interesting draw to it, because basically, he's just like, yeah, it's fun being bug fodder, isn't it? He is a part of the thrill of the kill, and it never ceases to amaze me how everyone just goes over everyone's head. They don't.
God bless Clancy Brown, man.
Yeah, perfect genre star. And so I'm gonna wrap this up, and I'm going to let you plug yourself.
Sure.
Where can we find on Podcasting After Dark for those who criminally have not gone into it yet?
Yeah, you can find me and my buddy Zach talking about cult movies on Podcasting After Dark. You can find all the podcatcher, Spotify links and everything on the website, podcastafterdark.com. And our main show, Podcast After Dark, we review movies and we break them down and review them. And the main episodes are about 3 hours long plus. So it's pretty long. But we have a couple other shows on there as well called The Watch List, and a new one that we've just put out called TV Obscura, where we talk about obscure TV shows. So hopefully we're going to have you on the watch list soon as well, once we lock down a topic. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Very well said. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you ever so much.
Yeah, of course. And do me a favor, just we'll schedule the watch list. Just talk to me on Instagram and let me know what you want your topic to be. And then once you lock down the topic, don't tell me the movies. Keep that a secret, but tell me the topic, and then we will we'll lock it in. So I'm pretty open next couple of weeks. So let me know. Let me know when you're open.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much.
No problem, buddy. Have a good one.
Yeah, sorry to cut this short. I realized that it was going into another production meeting and they decided, let's start this earlier. But no, I will try and have you on this here way more often. There's so many other topics that I think would resonate with you even directly more, is just because I know everyone's seen this, but why do we keep coming back to it versus what's in the Metroplex now? Why does it not get old?
Well, I'm always down, and when this episode drops, I'll promote it as well. So let's just, we'll be talking on Instagram. Just hit me up, or we'll talk, and I'll definitely plug it and give you guys a boost and everything. And I'll have you on watch list, and I'm always down to come back, man. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad that we finally synced up.
Absolutely, it was a treat. It absolutely was.
All right, brother. Have a good one, man.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up